Morning, Judge Gill.
Good morning.
My name is Kelly McKeon, and today I have the pleasure of interviewing Judge Gill. It's November 11th, 2013. I am conducting the interview as part of the Connecticut Bar Foundation's James W. Cooper Fellows' History of Legal Services in Connecticut project. Judge Gill, would you mind starting off by giving us a brief timeline of your active involvement in legal aid, how you got started in legal aid, and when?
All right, it's very unusual at the beginning for a position, I can tell you. It began in August of 1963. At that time I was married and between my second and third year of law school. And I had a side job, which was I was a certified softball umpire. And I just finished doing the top game Class A fast pitch in Connecticut, and I gave it up. Except I got a call, Judge, I wasn't a judge then, lawyer, attorney, would you please come out and do an umpiring job for some underprivileged kids, 2 teams? It was a Sunday morning. They talked me into it. I figured I'd have some help, you know. So I went out there, and the teams were out there, and there's a huge crowd. I couldn't believe there's so many people there for 17 and under softball. It was slow pitch. So the first pitch comes, and I call ball to strike, and the other side starts screaming at me with the foulest language possible. So I went, whoa, take it easy, folks. Call the next pitch, the other side starts the same thing on me. So finally, I called both coaches over. I said, look, can't work this way. If you do that again, I'll forfeit. They said, you don't know what a strike? I said, I was the guy who wrote the strike zone for softball. Slow pitch softball. I was one of the 3. So anyhow, next pitch, they again get on me. So that's it. I take my little mask and I start walking away, and I hear a thundering herd. They all came at me with baseball bats and everything else. And I got whacked. I put my hands up like this to stop the punches and the bats. But I got a punch here, split my lip all the way around. It's flapping in the wind. I'm bleeding like anything. And I fought my way back to my car. They broke a window. I drove off. Long story short, through the influence of some friends, I got a doctor to see me. I didn't want to go to ER. And he put 8 stitches in here without Novocaine.
Sure, that didn't feel good.
He said, look, you're a lawyer. You're going to be a lawyer. You have to talk, and if this will distort your mouth sound. I did that. So a little later on in the day, my dad was president of the Board of Police Commissioners, so we had some in. The cops brought in this whole lineup of like 10 or 12 kids. And they said, go down the line and pick out who hit you, right? At the end, I said, I can't do that. I mean, I don't know. I don't remember. He said, pick any 5. I said, I don't operate that way. I said, what if I picked one of the kids that was trying to help me? You know, it's just not just. Well, that story got back to one of the Outlanders. Outlanders are people that my friend Dick Lee, mayor, had brought in to run the city of New Haven. In other words, the redevelopment director was from New York, the traffic guy was from Boston, you know. So, and all the guys in legal aid that coming in, like Frank Denny, you know, they were called Outlanders. Okay. So, that story got back anyhow to the powers that be, including James Cooper. I got this call. I guess they decided that maybe for the first neighborhood legal services lawyer, they probably should have a homie rather than, you know, another guy from Brooklyn or someplace. So that's how I got the job, not on merit, right? And my wife wanted to go back from D.C., so that's what I did. We came back, and I never regretted a moment of it.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what office did you start in?
Well, we opened the first office on Law Day, 1965, on Congress Avenue. And at that time, there was a slight stress in my life. We just had our second child, and some members of the Bar Association were very upset with this program. And they were trying to apply for an arrest warrant for me for the illegal practice of law by the Ford Foundation, by a corporation, the Ford Foundation. So my wife said, your first job you're going to get arrested on, you know. So anyhow, one of my great professor friends at Yale Law School got a hold of a Supreme Court justice who came down and cut the ribbon, and that put away all the fears of being arrested when the justice came down. So that was it, and it was a nice ceremony. We had all people from the neighborhood gathered around, lawyers, professors, and people of interest, even a few politicians were there. And it was a very momentous day, but I still remember it very well.
What was it like in the beginning working for legal aid?
Well, everything was brand new, okay? I had worked while we're waiting for the neighborhood office to open, which was the pool hall at one time.
Wow.
It was also a bookie joint. And that building was owned by a slum landlord, who eventually we converted. He became a great supporter of ours. Morris, I forget his last name. So in any event, we went there. I had one secretary, and Janet, and her last name was Black, and that was it. That was our office. You know, they put in some desks and typewriters, of course, then. Mm-hmm. And we tried to get a bathroom working, which did work on occasion. It did not work when the justice came down from the Supreme Court.
Oh, gosh.
A little embarrassing, but in any event, we just put our sign out. And it was in Time magazine, I think, in Wall Street Journal. They had a picture of the law office with the sign, the Neighborhood Legal Assistance. People didn't know quite what we were. But I was kind of social. I went around and stopped in the bars, the stores, and talked to people. And I did know a few people in that neighborhood, which helped. So eventually, the folks came to know what we were doing, and they came in with just about everything you could think of. Even though the bar argued that there was no need for this, we had 1,500 clients the first year. Mm-hmm. And eventually we got some Yale law students to come in, volunteer to help me. Among them is Hugh Price, famous guy, you know Hugh Price, and who's now a professor at Princeton, by the way. And so we stumbled through, and eventually I caught on, and people caught on that they could trust us. So there's all kinds of crime in the neighborhood. Nothing ever touched us. And the experience was mind-boggling for me, coming from a conservative Roman Catholic family, seeing other cultures. I was totally trusted. I was invited to, which would astound my mom and dad, to the baptism of what they call an illegitimate child, you know. Mm-hmm. I was in people's homes. I was even with the druggies, and feigned everything with them. You know, I never turned them in. But I had their trust, and eventually, besides the law stuff, we were doing two other things. One was organizing them to help themselves. So we actually helped organize about 7 self-help groups in the neighborhood. 2 of the most outstanding were HAG, Hill Action Group, and the other one was the Spanish American Association of New Haven, which I was one of the founders of, with a guy named Silverio Diaz Colon, who was a Korean War veteran. It's appropriate on this date that we mentioned that. So that got going, and we did everything. I mean, everything from one kid had a loose tooth. They all came in, you know, Pedro, and I pulled it. Okay, and I said, "I'm gonna count to 3 and pull it."
So you were a dentist and a lawyer.
I pulled it on 2, you know.
Wow.
So, well, I was a medic in the Army, so I knew some of my stuff, and we did little things like that. So everybody trusted us. That was important. Then I realized that their problems were more than just social things. I mean, there's a book out called The Poor Pay More, which I read, and I think everyone listening should read, because these people are being taken advantage of by everybody. For example, the used car dealer in town, in the area, was called Jimmy the Jip, okay? And they come in and say, Attorney Gill, I bought this car for $200. It broke down. Who'd you buy it from? Jimmy the Jip. I go, hello. And then they'd buy furniture on consignment, and they'd make payments. The payments never ended. They'd sell the paper, then the interest was like 22%. So we had to deal with that. So Janet and I actually were sitting down with people, giving them a budget, and I'd be arguing with their creditors. Okay, and getting them down, and threatening to do this with them, that with them. So we made a lot of things disappear. But the other thing also that we did there that was kind of interesting, again, emphasizing getting to know the people, because they were afraid to go downtown to the legal aid office. Okay, they didn't know where downtown was, and so everything happened within their neighborhood, and we were there. It made a tremendous difference. The first year there, besides the cases I've mentioned, we handled, well, you name the case, we did it. You know, we didn't do divorces because those folks weren't getting divorced. But we did do criminal, all kinds of civil, defense, and we, of course, plaintiff's cases we'd send out to regular lawyers as opposed to irregular lawyers. But it was a charming influence on me in my entire life. It changed my view of people. And if you'd like to hear about a few cases I did that point that out.
Certainly, I'd like to get to that. I'd just like to jump back real quick to the self-help groups that you were talking about.
Yeah.
How did those get formed? What was sort of the thought process in forming those?
Well, Silverio Diaz Colon and I sat down at a bar. And we said, let's do this. So he said, okay. So we ended up with over 400 members. We rented a top floor of a commercial building on Grand Avenue. We had a grand opening. I was the opening speaker, and I made a huge boo-boo. My wife could read and write Spanish, so I'd write my speech in English, and she'd write it in Spanish. So I went up, I said, Salud, damas y caballeros, his name is Charles Gill, Abogado Gill. I would like to, then I tried to tell him that my nacionalidad is Irish Americano, mis vestidos es ingleses, English clothing, and mis corazón es Puerto Ricano, my card, okay? Well, when I got to mis vestidos, they started to go, ooh, ooh. My wife put the feminine in. So I was saying, I wear English dresses, okay, as opposed to...
That went over well.
They were very polite, but I asked later, they said, you said you're like a cross-dresser or something. So that was kind of fun. And then they actually started the Spanish-American Parade. What? And I was oddly enough, later on, I was the Grand Marshal of St. Patrick's Day Parade, but I was also the Grand Marshal of the first Spanish-American Association, sitting up in the back of a convertible with a big hat on, and everybody's playing music. It was great fun.
So did you run these meetings, or?
No, I set them up.
And so they sort of evolved, and over time it was the community.
It was a community thing.
That was running them.
Yeah, and then 5 others sprung up. There was another group, they eventually called themselves 7 together, 7 different groups, all usually minorities and disadvantaged people.
Oh, okay.
So that was kind of
interesting.
It was nice.
So why don't we talk about some of the memorable cases, memorable clients?
Okay.
Any stories in particular that stand out to you?
Oh, sure. The first one is one I wrote in my law review piece I did in 1966 on this. Was I called him George X at the time. George came up from down deep south. He had 9 children. His wife had 1 leg. They were living in ghastly situations. He had a job at the time I think paid about $100 a week, and there's no way they were going to make it. So I eventually helped them all the way along the line, using my political contacts to get them into public housing. I got other groups that helped with her. She needed an artificial leg. I told him to go on welfare. Okay, he was trying to be so on it. But the only answer for them at that time, for the help they needed, was welfare. Mm-hmm. So it seems odd to say that, but that was the solution temporarily. Eventually, he received some more education. I think he became the chef or something like that. And eventually they pulled themselves out of it. But with 9 kids coming up, they had nothing. So I felt very badly about it. And I didn't know things like that were happening to Americans. But I sure found out quickly. Another case was, this guy's name was John, and he wasn't very competent, nor was his wife, as individuals and his parents. They had 3 girls. And somehow or other they came to the attention of the Department of Children and Family, which I'm not sure if it was even in existence then. It was just coming into existence. So John used to come and take pictures of me all the time. I don't know why. He was just a picture. That was his affliction. So he came in and told me there was an awful thing happened. He said the state came and took away his 3 daughters. So then they were in juvenile court. And he said, so I went down with him to juvenile court. And of course I met his wife. She had never seen a dentist in her life, poor thing. She was, totally absent of teeth. So I went into the juvenile court on Orange Street in New Haven. And went in and I told him I was there to represent John and his wife. So out come the 3 girls running at them. Mom, Dad, you can't believe this. We slept in our own beds last night. We have new pajamas. Okay, I'm thinking, gee whiz, pretty good, huh? So now we get to the trial. They want to terminate the parental rights of these 2 parents. Why? The alleged social worker had gone to the house and found a photograph on the wall of Joseph Goebbels, the famous Nazi, right? In the bathtub, there were turtles, okay? You know, you can't make these things up, obviously.
Live turtles?
Live turtles in the bathtub, so you know who was not using the bathtub, the three girls and mom and dad. So so we're going to start the thing, and there was a judge there, I have to get his name, and I said, I'm here to represent the parents. He said, all right, have a seat. He said, we can start. He said, let me call my first witness, social worker. I said, whoa, wait a minute. Your Honor, I would like to have a court reporter here so we can have a record of what's going on here. We don't use them. I said, we don't. I said, I'm going to have to stop the proceedings, and I'll have to go to the court and get an order. So after some more intimidation from him, we got a court reporter over there. So then he calls up his social worker, and she testifies about the turtles in the picture and a few other things. So when she finishes, he says, you can step down. I said, well, Your Honor, I would like to cross-examine her. He said, you want to cross-examine my witness, he said. I said, I don't know if you're your witness or what, but I think I have a right to cross-examine. So he reluctantly allowed me to do so. And it ends up, the witness for the state had a English major in college. Okay, she had practically no training in this area. She did not understand some of the terms she used in her report when I questioned her. So I think I lost, but I kind of think on appeal, maybe Frank or somebody like that won, and that because he used to visit me again every place I was. This is John with picture. And the girls, apparently, I checked once on them, and they were doing pretty well in school. But I think what they did was get like mentors for them. Okay, which is something I'm into right now, as a matter of fact, person. So,
was that type of reaction by judges in the court when there was legal aid attorneys representing clients common at that point in time, or?
Well, it certainly was in juvenile court. I think it varied in the other courts, circuit court, common pleas, and superior court. I remember one case, the first criminal case I tried. Two young men were charged with robbing an older man at knife point at his throat. And I was a neophyte. I went over there for the pretrial, and they thought because I was a newbie and a legal aid guy, that if they put me on trial, I'd fold. But they didn't know. I prepared. I was ready. I didn't even know you had a pretrial, and then had a trial later on. I thought you went right into it. So that's how dumb I was. So we started picking the jury. We picked the jury. We start the case. And they put the victim on the stand, and I made a huge lawyer's mistake. I got him to describe the knife to his neck, and of course it got this, then it got this bigger, then it got this bigger, and this bigger. And when it got to this big, I should have just shut up, but I didn't. So I turned to the jury and I said, "Do you mean, Mr. Johnson, that the knife put to your neck was actually this big, about a yard?" And he said, "Well, it sure do look like it when it's up to your neck." I went like a saying, "Great move, Attorney Gill." But then I thought I was dead in the case. But I don't know what possessed me, but I went up and I got very close to him. Now this was like 11 o'clock in the morning, and I could smell alcohol on him. So I said to him, "Mr. Johnson, are you a drinking man?" And the state's attorney then was Arnold Marco. And he said, "I object, Your Honor." And Mr. Johnson said, "I object too, Your Honor." Okay. So I turned to the jury. I was smiling. I said, "Well, if you both object, there must be a reason." So what happened was, in redirect, Marco started talking to him, and the guy started to back off. So he called a recess, and apparently the guy said, "I'm really not sure which one of those two guys did it." So the case was nollied. I said, dismissed. My first case in, and I won. And I still don't know who did it or didn't do it. I do know that I had one guy for sure go to jail when he was totally innocent, because I represented the guilty guy. And I told that to the state's attorney. I said, "I know who did it. He's willing to do a year in jail." And they wouldn't do it. So injustice was done. And injustice to this day still bothers me to no end, So that's that.
So let's talk a little bit about your mentors or any memorable colleagues, maybe at Legal Aid or outside of Legal Aid.
Well, the first one was Frank Denis when he was working in legal aid in New Haven, and I moved to office in like next to him, and that's what I learned about. He was like a wizard at keeping people in their homes, finding defects in it. It used to be evictions were like automatic, like collection lawyers would automatically win. But he put it into it, and I learned how to put an end to it. And once we stood up for people, they usually backed down on the other side. And we virtually put, I think, eviction lawyers out of business and a lot of collection lawyers out of business. So that's one kind of a good memory there.
Okay. What was the reaction of the private bar to Legal Aid and, the reaction in the judiciary? Do you recall?
Oh, sure. We had a meeting of the bar in the major courthouse on Elm Street, and they wouldn't let Fred Danforth in, even.
Wow.
Okay, that's how tight it was. So there was the big flock of lawyers who were the collection lawyers and so on. And then there were the do-gooders like Jim Cooper and other people from other firms, and just regular good guys and ladies. And it was kind of a vitriolic evening. As I recall, they decided to vote, but rather than by hand vote, as I recall, we moved to one side of the room, to the other side of the room. And I was proud to be on the side of the room and voted for my job.
Yeah.
So and that's how it came about. And I think the fear of most of the bar dissipated over time. Because,
Why do you think there was the fear in the beginning?
well, it would be like doctors, I suppose, if you said, we're going to bring in neighborhood legal medical services and we'll take care of them free. They say, "Ooh, wait a minute, there goes my livelihood," or something like that.
Okay.
So I think that was kind of understandable for some. But I think our bar came through quite good in the end, so with wonderful people that were a part of it in New Haven.
Mm-hmm. And how long do you think that took to have that attitude change towards legal aid attorneys?
Probably a year.
Okay.
Probably a year, my guesstimate. But it happened, and nobody thinks twice about it anymore. My only disappointment is that we're still not in the neighborhoods,
Okay.
because I think that, made us uptight and personal with people, that they trusted us. Now they've got to come downtown again,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what the reasons for that. I'm sure there were good reasons, maybe financial reasons. But the time in the neighborhood, that was just unbelievably good.
Mm-hmm.
And I think all the law students that came with us, including Roger Kuntz was one that came down, okay? Stayed and hung out because of what they felt. It's one thing being a good doctor, a good lawyer, a good teacher, but seeing and feeling for the people you're with, that's very important. And I certainly felt that.
Would you say that that's one of your fondest memories, or the favorite things that you appreciated about your time in legal aid was actually working in the community?
Right, that's exactly right. I had more information about what was going on than any police department or CIA or NSA could ever find out, okay? They trusted me, they told me things. I knew who was in trouble. I could get somebody from maybe a church or to help.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the very radical people were there too, and I engaged them too, and they trusted me too.
Mm-hmm.
At some public meetings, I start to speak, and they go, shh, because they had something planned,
Yeah.
So I was going to mess it up by bringing logic to it. So I really got tight with them, and oddly enough, one of those leaders, when I was first on the bench in 1983, I was looking up and I saw this familiar name. I looked up, and there was this guy who was one of the neighborhood radicals, standing with his son in front of me. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So it was kind of touching to do that. But again, the trust was there. And today, even the people that come to where I'm sitting in Litchfield, Connecticut, people come in that are, if you want to call them underprivileged, whatever the favorite term is today, it varies. They don't trust. They don't trust their public defenders. They don't trust the judges. They don't trust the system. And that's bad. And I'm working on projects now to try and educate the American public about what judges do and what the system is about and so forth and so on. But having a tough time doing that.
So do you think the trust really came because you're in the community?
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, and because I went to their homes.
Mm-hmm.
One of my son's companies has 300 lawyers that are volunteered in Connecticut for pro bono work. But that's great. But you have to go and see where the people live and see about them. You learn so much by being there. I mean, maybe that's my personal quirk, but I kind of think it's a song, getting to know you, getting to know all about you. That's the way you do it one-on-one. It's not just in your office, but in their place. And if you're in their place, sometimes you see where they need help.
Mm-hmm.
Something you say, whoa, this could be a health problem. I could help them out here, okay?
So how do you think young attorneys today, gain the trust of their clients in the community?
Well, it's because we don't have the neighborhood law
Right.
offices. That's a problem. But I would suggest young attorneys to learn would volunteer to be mentors to young men and women.
I know that you've started a program where you're mentoring.
Yeah, I mentor.
You want to talk a little about
Yeah,
that?
I mentored through Big Brothers and Sisters. I mentored through DCF. I mentored through private. 5 or 6 young men. Successful so far in about 3 or 4. I can't win all.
Mm-hmm.
But in all those cases, I've been to their homes. I eaten in their homes. I've been with them. I know their parents. Sometimes there's only one. In most cases, there is only one parent. And some of the backgrounds these young men have, and women, I don't know women, but the young men, are just terrific. You can't imagine them. And so when I eventually sentenced them to prison, I have one family. I'm in the third generation of sentencing them in jail. Okay? Predictable behavior because they have incompetent parents to begin with. So that's the way it goes. But the mentoring that I've done, one of my successes is now a teacher. And he was married in Florida. I was his best man. I could have been his grandfather. Another one of mine is an EMT going to become a nurse. And he's also a piano prodigy. I found him in a mental institution. His background was that his father and mother were divorced when he was 3. His father came home at 4 and shot himself in front of him. He's the only child. And that affected his life. He was a slight guy, he was bullied and all that stuff. So I found him in a mental institution at a very young age. So that's what I think young lawyers can do. Get involved in helping programs. Big Brothers, Big Sisters are fine, wherever else you can find it. And also don't look necessarily for, I know some people are not going to like this, but don't necessarily look for the big law firms, And while you're in law school, it's important to do other things and connect. Like my daughter, when she was in law school, she worked with domestic violence programs outside. Make contacts that way with people, and other lawyers too, of course. Volunteer, do things. Just don't think law, think the law and people.
Mm-hmm.
And once we do that, we're on the right track.
Okay. So let's switch gears a little
Sure.
bit. What was the funding like in sort of the program structure when you were working for legal aid?
Well, it started out when I had legal assistance didn't exist when I was there. It was in the planning stages. So I was hired by Community Progress Incorporated, Ford Foundation, right? So I was paid by them, and they sent me over to sit next to Frank Deneen, which I did, until it was later formed, and then it was about a year later that we opened the first law office. We actually opened 2 the same day, but only one got the publicity, the one I happened to be in. So that's it. That's the story of the startup of it. The funding, I never had anything to do with.
Mm-hmm.
It just came from Ford Foundation.
So there was never a shortage? Did you feel like there was ever a shortage?
I don't believe there was a shortage at that time. And then, of course, you went to, when the Ford Foundation money dried up, in that transition, I wasn't there.
Okay.
So I think then we had to get money from the bar associations and,
Mm-hmm.
all the way we collect money
And
now.
how long did you spend at legal aid?
A little over 2 years.
Okay.
64, 66.
Okay. And what did you do after you left legal aid?
I was hired by the Jacobs Law Firm in New Haven. Spent a few years with them, and then it was out for the partnership in another firm. And I went there, and unfortunately in that firm, which wasn't wonderful people, I was the only one who went to court. and it became an awful burden. You don't want to hear about it. And then it was during that time that I, copying my next door neighbor, then Mayor Dick Lee, when he quit, he told me about it, and I thought I could take his place. So there were 3 candidates. One had been running for 6 months. The other one was going to be the party endorsed guy, and then myself. So I had a 6-week campaign. Well, we got 25% of the vote, which is not bad. The guy that had been campaigning for 6 months got about 35% of the vote, so the guy who won got under 50%. And it actually, we were friends. We were on the Board of Aldermen together, and he asked me to come and help. I got on the Board of Education for him. I ran the Air Pollution Control Advisory Committee for him, you know. And unfortunately, he just went one term and had a very sad death. So that was it, and still have a lot of memories of all those people. I mean, good people. Even the Outlanders were good, like Frank Deneen and Howard Moskoff, all those guys who, a lot of people, a lot of Yale people, you know, professors who had a great deal of interest in this eleemosynary professional endeavor that I hope saved a lot of people. I know it. I know we did. I know we did. Because I had very few people going to jail on my watch. Mm-hmm. And also, the chief prosecutor at the time had also run for mayor on a Republican ticket. He was a neighbor of mine. His name was Phil Mancini. He became a judge too. Okay. And he'd have Charlie Gill Day at the courthouse. We'd go into his office, have a pile of my files, and he used to get mad at me because I always said, not guilty, and, you know, and really give him a tough time, as most lawyers do today, right? So he brought me in, and we Friday afternoon was Charlie Gill Day. I'd sit down with him, he'd go through, he'd go, $100 fine. Now, $50. I said, doesn't have 50, 25. Okay. And we get rid of all his cases. Then we come in Monday or Tuesday, and I get all my cases gone. Never looking for anybody to get jail time. And so things were different then. People weren't as punitive as they are today, wanting everybody to go to jail for every little crime. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't that hard for me to do. Mm-hmm. Particularly everybody. And all the prosecutors were part-time. So God forbid they have to do a trial and work a whole day or 2 days, you see. So we had a little leverage on them too. Mm-hmm. And we knew which ones did not want to go to trial, so we put our cases to them mm-hmm. on the days they were on. Mm-hmm. Little things you don't learn in law school, but yeah. You learn on the street.
Right.
You know, so.
So what would you say has been the biggest impact of your time spent at Legal Aid on the rest of your legal career throughout your time at, you know, the law firms and into your judgeship and even now as a mentor? What experiences, or, you know, overall, just broadly speaking, what did you learn from your time at Legal Aid?
Well, it was good and bad. The good was that I learned about people and I developed a larger heart and concern for them. The bad part was when I went in private practice, I had a tough time charging people. Mm-hmm. I was never thinking about money, you see. Mm-hmm. So that probably aggravated my partners along the way.
Mm-hmm. There's certainly a tension there.
Yeah, there is. You know, and so I, you know, somebody gave me a real problem. I got into it with them, like a pastor or something, you know. So maybe I overdid it in that area, but then people come with a problem. I look at their problem, I don't look at their wallet. See, I had bad training with legal aid in that area, you see. Mm-hmm. I didn't care about money because I had a salary. So that was, but I think it's gone through my entire career as a lawyer, and then I became chief public defender for the state of Connecticut. Organized all those public defenders. Eventually they became full-time. They were all part-time when I came on. So I brought in people from out of state to organize them. Gave them some little courses in sensitivity. I would have private chats with those I thought were not sensitive. Mm-hmm. And then one day I got a call from my next door neighbor, Dick Lee. He says, Charlie, he said, oh, no. When I was marching in the St. Patrick's Day Parade, I think I was the Grand Marshal that year or the year before. I was marching with Governor O'Neill, right? So he's waving his hat, and we're talking, nothing to do about the parade. And all of a sudden he says, by the way, I put your name in, Charlie. I said, oh, thank you. So I asked Dick, I said, what did he put my name in for? become a judge, right? Guess what I did? Turned it down.
Really?
I didn't think I was old enough, mature enough to do it. But 5 years later, it happened. He put me on, so again, so I went on. Actually, it was El Grasso that appointed me first, and then Governor O'Neill appointed me 4 or 5 years later.
Mm-hmm.
So that was it. And where was my first assignment? New Haven.
Mm-hmm.
And I did criminal trials here for about 4 months before I moved on to Waterbury, and the usual circuits we run.
And have you had a lot of legal aid attorneys in front of you over the years?
In my neck of the woods, in Litchfield, it's kind of rare,
Okay.
but we do see, and if you're in the Raymond Court, you might see 1 or 2. I think Hartford, I was presiding in Hartford on the civil side, and we'd see, significant amount there. And I helped found the, what do they call it? Children's Law Center.
Okay.
That was done some years ago. It was we had a very bad case where a father, a very dangerous father, was allowed supervised visitation at a Catholic something or other, social work thing. And he came in with a gun and he shot the 9-year-old daughter, Ayala, and he shot the social worker and killed the daughter. As a result of that, a woman who's a Quaker contacted me and asked if I could come over to that neck of the woods and put on a program for people to see what we can do. So I did. It was a snowy day. We had about 400 or 500 people showed up in Eastern Connecticut. And I brought in people from Florida, Wisconsin, down south, who all were running children's programs. They all came in, and one of them put on a PowerPoint. And then at the very end, they asked me if I would go in and speak with 11 children who are in the court system. And I said, sure, but I have to sit the same size seats they do. I'm not wearing my jacket, and I don't want to hear a word from an adult, because we were in like one of those old classroom type things where they do cadavers down below. So I went in, I sat down with the little kids, and I have a little trick in remembering names. So I went around and got their names, and I, of course, remembered them. One little girl was so upset that she asked permission to turn her chair or her back to us, all right? So I spoke to about half an hour. All of a sudden, they go like this to me, So we got to stop. They're all telling me about their woes. So I said, look, kids, let's do one more thing. I want you to get together. The youngest was probably 7, the oldest about 12. I said, I want you to get together and come and tell me, after you talk it over, if you had a magic wand, it could change one thing in the court system, what would it be? You know what they said? They were only there like 3 minutes. They'd want to see a judge. They want to talk to the judge. They said they don't seldom see a judge. Things are being done in their lives they don't know about. Sometimes they hear things being said to a judge that this is the way they really feel. Okay, so that made a big impact. So then they opened the Children's Law Center. I was on the board over in Eastern Connecticut, and then they expanded to Hartford eventually. So it was a nice, that goes back to the neighborhood stuff I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
Easy enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
There you have it.
So just one final question. What advice would
How
you...
old am I? No, I'll answer that one.
That's off the record. What advice would you give to future legal aid attorneys in Connecticut?
Open your minds and your hearts. To me, law could be the most boring profession in the world, sitting in a back room in a large corporate office, working your way up the corporate ladder, so to speak. I like dealing with people. I don't like too much the academic side, although I've done plenty of that, of course. Argued all those big courts. But I think the advice would be to, if you want to be happy the rest of your life, look for a job or position that has you direct contact with people. Because that's your real reward. Like if you're a coach and you see your player, score a basket or win a game or go on to success, you feel like you've really done something in life. It's not just to me, a matter of dollars. It never has been.
Mm-hmm.
So that's my advice. Open heart, open mind.
Great.
Okay.
Well, thank you, Judge Gill.
My pleasure. And you're doing a wonderful job.
Thank you.